Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of texturing the fire hydrant. I'm jumping into Photoshop here pretty quickly, and I'm taking in that ambient occlusion layer that I talked about in the previous lesson. And like I said, I'm putting it in a multiply layer, and then right below that I'm adding a sort of just a solid red fill for the fire hydrant base color. And the idea here is to duplicate the red color layer, shift the colors around a little bit with the hue and saturation, and then I'm going to start painting out the red layer on top with a layer mask. And that's going to allow me to weather the edges of the fire hydrant just a little bit. And again, it's kind of something you have to think about when you're going in and texturing an object, and you've got all the capabilities in the world to go in here and just noodle this thing to death. So be aware that you can spend a lot of hours in Photoshop texturing, and sometimes it's a good idea. But on a lot of objects that are just going to be background in the scene, it's kind of a waste of time to come in here and spend more than more time than is necessary to kind of just get whatever's going to be shown in the scene into the texture map. So even for this model, I probably spent a little bit more time than I should have coming in here and painting up the texture. Depending on what your discipline ends up being in 3D, if you're a generalist or a texture artist or whatever, you may like this process or you may not. I'm kind of a fan of the digital painting world, so any chance I get to jump into Photoshop, I'm always a fan of coming in here and playing around. So this is sped up a lot. This is probably, it was 45 minutes or so. Probably took to paint this whole thing, and I brought it down about 8 minutes. So if that gives you any kind of idea. And the reason being, there is a process to learning how to texture this way. But honestly, if you've got even basic Photoshop painting skills, I'm using a Wacom tablet here, but that's pretty much all you need to come in here with a pen and just start painting up basic textures. And it's really boring to watch if you're watching someone do an entire model from scratch. Unless the subject matter is really, really interesting, it's not something that's really fun to watch. The color map is probably the most interesting thing, and then when you get into bump maps and specularity maps, it just kind of it tapers off, and it's not something that's fun anymore. So anyways, what I'm doing is I'm dialing back the color here to kind of be a little more subtle for the weathering. And I'm going to go in now and start adding some dirt into the crevices. And again, it probably went a little overboard for the things that you're going to see on the fire hydrant. Because it's so dark in the scene, our final render is going to be kind of a moonlit nighttime shot. So again, be aware that you need to be thinking about the application of your model. And I know I keep saying that, but it's really something that I hope to drill home with you guys, that it's really easy, to get super involved into the 3D process at every step of the way, and want to spend more time than is really necessary just to make sure something's perfect. And honestly, you can waste a lot of time and effort doing stuff like that, whereas I think more time spent preparing and then fixing things or changing effects in post are probably a better idea than spending all of your time in the middle in the production process. Because it may take you an hour to paint a texture map, but it only takes you 5 seconds to tweak the colors in the final render if you're editing. So it's important to kind of gauge what you need to do for each scene. So there, I've wrapped the texture map. I brought it back into to Blender, and I've got my color map and then a basic bump map, which is basically just a grayscale version of that with a little bit of noise. And so this is the final render. This is the first time you guys are probably seeing the rest of the textures behind there. And that's kind of what our end scene is going to be set up for with the textures. And in the next lecture, we're going to step in and we're going to start talking about the final render and how to set that up. And we're going to tweak the lighting. We're going to learn about a little bit more about compositing, and then I may even take it into Photoshop for final paint over if we want to add some more things and more details in the scene. So hope you guys enjoyed this short lecture on texturing, and I will see you in the final section.